Hi there and welcome to the Snap UK podcast in a week when there's actually football. Woo!
Yay!
Yay, go everyone. Thursday night football. Yeah, woo. It's going to be a blowout, but we'll get to that. So, we haven't done our season previews. That's what we're here for this evening. Everyone's done their research. Gary. Sadly, Paul can't join us because he has a job where everything has actually gone, quote, mental. So, we'll have to leave him aside and we'll talk about what he thinks is going to happen later in the season because he hasn't replied. So I can't tell you what his previews are going to be because he has a proper job. Before we get to the previews, we have to go through some things in the news that are quite important. We will start with the news this evening of DeAndre Hopkins getting a new contract because Jim will have the numbers in front of him.
No.
$57 million 2-year contract.
And he negotiated it himself.
Negotiated by DeAndre Hopkins, I believe.
2-year deal. I think that's outstanding money for a player who's going to get to hit free agency again if he wants to.
I'm sure everyone knows what the top wide receiver was being paid, or the next top wide receiver was being paid a year, don't you? Julio Jones was being paid $22 million a year.
So, good money.
About $6 million a year more than Julio.
Setting the market, and rightly so.
And I haven't done any research.
Good. Setting the market, rightly so. John's advertising Coke Zero on this podcast. Well done, John.
I'm even happier that I picked him up in Dynasty yesterday now.
We're going to leave the fantasy conversation to one side because we simply don't have time today.
I know.
We'll do it
next week.
Another. But yeah, so Hopkins rightly setting the market. There was another contract this evening. Hunt has got himself a deal as well. Nowhere near that sort of money. And as John was trying to point out earlier, basically has ruined himself on the market because people don't want to take a chance on him, I think.
I think he's done all right.
He's done all right for
it's not quite as good as it's not quite as good as deal with the prosecutor, but it's not far off.
Was it 13 million over 2 years?
Yeah, that's all right. That's pretty decent for a running back.
Not bad for a wife beater.
Yeah, he's not going to be the principal running back in Cleveland either, so I think that's good money.
No, but when he emerged last year, he really limited Nick Chubb in the passing game. Really limited.
Yeah.
He scored the same points as Chubb, pretty much, for the last 6 games or whatever. Scored 100 points, didn't he?
I wouldn't be surprised if, referring to fantasy, he outscores Chubb. Chubb's only got to miss a couple of games through injuries, and Hunt will outscore him. So, but it's good for the Cleveland Browns. That's the main thing. They need a big step forward. We'll get to them in a little while. Jadeveon Clowney finally lands on a roster, signs with the Titans. The most interesting thing about this is the way other teams tried to sign and trade and swap money, and I'm not really sure why it wasn't allowed.
I don't know. I think the NFL are saying it's against the spirit of the salary cap and the way players are dealt with and signed. But to your point, Griff, there's nothing in the rules that says it's illegal. So for everyone else who doesn't know, effectively both the Saints and the Ravens tried to sign Jadeveon Clowney through another team. So the Saints had a deal in place with the Browns where the Browns would pay $5 million signing bonus to Jadeveon Clowney, and then would trade him to the Saints for a second-round pick, at which point the Saints would boost his contract by $10 million, so $15 million in total. Effectively, the Browns paying $5 million for a second-round pick. And there's a similar deal in place between the Ravens and the Jags, but the NFL poo-pooed it, shall we say, and said, no, you're not doing this. And the Titans swept in and signed him.
Last time a deal like this happened?
Was it Brock Osweiler?
It was Brock Osweiler from Texans to...
Yeah, a little bit different because it was just it was a case of the Browns just swallowing that kind of that salary.
But
yeah.
In principle, it's the same idea.
Yeah.
It happens quite a lot in basketball, in the NBA. And I think the NFL are trying to avoid it because it's basically swapping cash, which they don't want to do.
Yeah.
But
exactly. So I think,
everything's been a bit stale in the off-season. At least it was an interesting attempt.
Yeah, and I think if the NFL are serious about if they're going to just not accept this deal going forward, these types of deals going forward, then they need to put something into the rules that says you can't do it, and that will just be that. Otherwise, it becomes a bit of a talking point for us talking heads.
Yeah. Mitchell Trubisky wins the only real quarterback competition that we think was happening in camp, beats Nick Foles. I don't think there's any surprise here, but I don't know how long the leash is.
Yeah, for now.
3 games?
I don't know. I think I think he'll be there for more than 3 games. I don't think that Nick Foles is the answer to anybody's problems, if I'm honest. And Trubisky, I think, will get at least 7 or 8 games.
Excuse me, somebody's gone past an enormous motorcycle. The 2 key things here are Nick Foles is getting paid $21 million, guaranteed, and Mitchell Trubisky doesn't have his option picked up, so he's probably leaving anyway. So don't they need to play Foles and see what they can get out of him to see whether he is the answer for the next couple of years while they bring someone else in?
I think
he probably isn't staying.
He's better than Trubisky. He can get the receivers that they have in space, and that is what Trubisky hasn't done. What we'll get onto the Bears in our NFC thing, but quarterback is not the only issue at the Bears.
But 2 years ago, Trubisky wasn't terrible. Like, he got the Bears to the playoffs. So
he's done
a very good year.
Goff, really.
Yeah,
he's done a better job than we give him credit for. The problem is the team is better than it's being allowed to show, and he is what's holding it back half the time. Or the defense is.
No, the defense is fine. The defense is on the pitch too much.
But it's being, and that's the problem. The defense is being held back from being a contender because the offense can't move the ball.
The running game's in poor for ages as well. But like John says, we'll cover this in the previews, I suppose.
Okay. Finally, then, before we go through the cut downs, the last piece of news was Marcus Mariota being put on IR and Deshaun Kaiser coming back in from nowhere and being signed to the practice squad on the Raiders. Why? I don't know. You're better off just having no one there because he'll just get migraines and throw interceptions.
Hey, he needs to get his 6 rings.
His Tom Brady-esque style rings. I'm disappointed with Mariota, but I'm pleased for Derek Carr because he gets nothing but grief. And actually, he's been a perfectly fine quarterback for the Raiders. I don't really get the abuse.
Derek Carr's been more than fine. Like he had one year where at one point he was in MVP conversation until he got injured. And since then, he's had a litany of head coaches. I'm not sure if he's a good mix with John Gruden. I don't think John Gruden's ever had confidence in Derek Carr, so it could be that we do see a change further down the line. But Derek Carr, I think, is a fine quarterback.
Was he not one of the first quarterbacks to get the big $100 million plus contract?
Yeah.
So I think because of that, there was a lot of pressure associated to that.
Yes.
Win the Raiders a Super Bowl, take them deep into the playoffs. I think they got to the playoffs one year, didn't they?
Yeah,
like you say, he
didn't play
before the playoffs, wasn't he? He was injured for the playoffs.
Yeah, Connor Cook played.
So I think
whether they're getting value for the contract is a different conversation as to whether or not he's a good enough quarterback. If they've overpaid, that's their fault. But I think they'd struggle to just instantly plug in a better quarterback you can get hold of.
Yeah, he's like Stafford, isn't he? Stafford. People think he gets overpaid. I'd put Carr and Stafford together every time.
I think that's a very fair comparison.
Similar in terms of talent levels.
Well, didn't Stafford overtake Carr as the top paid quarterback? They're now a bit linked.
Are we in the danger of going for another season here where Gary and I start agreeing on things? So it's a bit of a worry.
It's taking a long time to
learn. Cut down. Anybody notice anything? Any players that were cut or traded as the cut?
FA. Yeah, he's gone, isn't he? After
he's been re-signed today.
Has he?
Yeah. They told him he was safe.
They told him he was safe. Yeah. So he's had an up and down week.
To be fair, he did at least troll himself by retweeting his previous tweet saying that aged well, like a day later.
Clinton Dix cut at the Cowboys. I thought that was quite a big one. He was decent when he was at the Packers, and he went to the Redskins, didn't he? And he wasn't that great, and bounced around to the Cowboys, and they've cut him as well. And there's always been rumours that the Cowboys have been interested in Earl Thomas, but that seems to not been happening. I mean, Earl Thomas is still out there.
I'm guessing maybe he must have left when Mike McCarthy left, or a similar. Maybe he must have left Green Bay just before McCarthy left.
Yeah, I think it was.
So maybe he thought he was done because he's obviously getting on a bit, isn't he?
Wow.
Maybe.
27.
Yeah.
Was that all?
Yeah, I don't think he's very old at all.
Yeah.
He had 2 bad years,
so that's not exactly an improvement.
I think he's a system player. I think he requires time in order to be any good. Adrian Peterson, obviously a bit of a surprise cut for me from Washington, but they need to play the youngsters to see what they've got. That's the only thing. He's been their lead rusher for 2 seasons, nearly 2,000 yards. I mean, and he's signed for the Lions. And the chances are, because of the injury record of the other running backs there, he's probably going to be their lead rusher as well.
Well, they've got Kerryon Johnson, who misses games.
Yeah.
They've got
DeAndre
this new
Swift, who's going to start the season missing the game.
Yeah. So, he stands, a great chance. I mean, it's not like when he went to New Orleans and there were 3 running backs and he was then surplus. I think he may get some time.
Yeah, I would say he's probably joint number 1 as opposed to being a clear number 3 in New Orleans. So, yeah, all that does is help Washington get towards the number 1 pick, which is probably what they're after. I'm sure we'll get to that. Anybody else want to nominate players for a mention before we move into
Leonard Fournette?
Yes.
Cut by the Jags and quickly signed by their Florida compatriots, the Buccaneers.
Doesn't even have to move house. Winner.
That's
David
now
Blau started like 5 games for the Lions last season. Deserves a mention, just because we laughed about him so much last year. He's gone, and I believe he's been put back on the practice squad, or he's certainly rumoured to be going back. But that's a big one. Justin Rollwasser at the Patriots with the slightly racist tattoo on the arm.
So the Patriots haven't got a kicker yet on their roster, have they?
I believe they're talking about bringing him back, but the Nick Folk release apparently is procedural. He can be back once they've started putting other players on IR, which they couldn't do until after yesterday.
Right.
So it's a Belichick move. But no, technically at the moment, I don't think we have a kicker. So we'll just wheel out somebody else. Whatever. Cam, probably. Yeah. Any more before we move on?
No, let's crack on.
Good.
Yeah.
Right. So, podcast today is in 2 pieces. The first part will be previewing the AFC. Everybody's been nominated a division, and we're going to go straight into it. John, you were given the AFC North. So,
yes.
Take us through what you think will happen to each team, your final standings, and a rough prediction, if you could, please.
Okay. So, AFC North, I think it's hopefully the Ravens now need to take the regular season form into the postseason. That's the only thing that they need to do, because unless Lamar gets injured, there's not been enough change in that team for them to have a drastic downtick. So, yeah, Lamar's obviously off an MVP year. If he can get better at throwing, then who knows what might happen. But he's had obviously he's the star now for them. They've brought in Patrick Queen off the draft, who should be able to help fill holes. They had linebacker is where they have issues.
Their run defense wasn't great last year, was it? So they were drafted by bringing in Patrick Queen. They've also got Calais Campbell as well.
Calais Campbell is going to help them so much because he takes double teaming, and don't laugh. But the other rusher whose name I'm going to have to look him up.
Matt Judon.
Brandon Williams. Brandon Williams. We might see a massive upturn in his sacks and pressures this year because Calais Campbell's going to take a lot of the attention for him. So that bodes really well for a defense which was decent, if not brilliant. It's not like the old Baltimore Raven days of Ray Lewis and stuff. But Patrick Queen will help. A little short, but seems like he's going to fit in just well there. They look like they're going for another decent year. J.K. Dobbins as well from the draft to help with a already very good rush offense.
That's a like-for-like replacement for Mark Ingram, isn't it? You got him for a year, and you can just sit behind Ingram, learn his trade, and then next year Like we did a dynasty draft yesterday, and I was gutted that someone else picked J.K. Dobbins because I think he's going to be a superb player.
Yeah, I think Paul got him.
I don't think he's going to be a superb player this year.
No,
not this year.
That's why I said for dynasty. I think.
I'm waiting. I'm waiting for another 4 years so I can get Frank Gore Jr.
I think Gus Edwards gets a bit overlooked in that offense as well. He's like the yards per attempt leader for the last 2 seasons in rushing.
Gus the Bus.
Gus the Bus. That's a good depth chart at running back that they've got there with Mark Ingram leading the way. My concern on offense for the Ravens is I'm not sure the wide receiver group is good enough to compensate for Lamar Jackson not being the best passer. So they get away with it on the ground, but once teams figure that out, Willie Snead and Miles Boykin behind Marquise Brown does nothing for me.
It's all about the tight ends anyway.
Yeah, I think Miles Boykin's also underrated. I think that's a big target for Lamar Jackson to like throw the ball to. And like to John's point, like Lamar Jackson's throwing ability or accuracy is probably his one weakness. Along with kind of Mark Andrews at tight end, if you've got another big receiver who's got a big wingspan, then he's 6'4".
Yeah,
basically tight end size. So I think you could see a resurgence from Mark Boykin.
How many touchdowns did Mark Andrews get last year? Was it like 10, 9, 10, something like that?
Yeah, about that.
I think he was the lead touchdown.
He started spreading it all around all his tight ends towards the end of the season.
Yeah, I can just see progression coming. I'm just not so sold on the receiving core. So I think that lets them down slightly. I was surprised there wasn't more of an investment in that.
That's for Harbaugh to work out. You've got if the run is stuffed, they've got to be better. But so far he seems capable. But he's not Tom Brady, but he doesn't need to be.
No, he did complete 66% of his passes compared to 58 in 2018. So there is an upturn in what Jackson can do, but I think he's reached the ceiling of his passing ability. So you have to then improve the squad.
I don't know, because if you've got a Antonio Brown in there, you're only going to overthrow him anyway. Pittsburgh, it's all about Ben. He's not thrown a ball since game 4 last year.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's someone who's affected by a lack of, training camp and stuff like that. But if he's back after surgery, then the team suddenly becomes a challenger because the defense is good enough that they missed out on the playoffs by a game.
Yeah,
and that was with 2 of the worst quarterbacks I've ever seen on a field.
Doug Corden got cut, didn't he?
Yeah. Doug, I don't know why Mason Rudolph didn't get cut as well, but there you
go. He's probably still seeing stars from getting his head hit by his own helmet. But if Ben's back, then that helps Juju. There are some other receiving options there. They
signed a new one in the draft, didn't they?
Yeah, and they've got Chase Claypool from last year, who looks like I think he's a tight end, but looks like a proper prospect. But
my early prediction for one of the outstanding players of the year is Eric Ebron, because Big Ben loves throwing to tight ends, and Eric Ebron, I think he's on for a touchdown year for
he does. I think you're right, but he's still got Vance McDonald there as well, who had a good year.
I knew you were going to go back to that 49ers legend there, Jim.
Yeah, exactly. You have to.
Great hair.
But they've had great success in the past with a twin tight end set. So, they lost Jesse James last year and never replaced him. This is the replacement for Jesse James. Allows Big Ben to go back to 2 tight ends. And, whilst you've got Big Ben, set up a team to what he likes, which is, 2 tight ends. And I'm not going to say anything else.
Can James Conner stay fit for the season?
No.
No, that's a concern. If they get
I like him. I like him.
They're fine.
I do like him. I think he's a talented player, but he's had 2 years where he's been injury prone in both. I'd love to see him fit. There's a good story there, but
I'd like to see him fit as well. So I got him in a fantasy league.
Me too.
Yeah.
Is a last resort. I really like Deontay Johnson as well, the wide receiver. He's been named as the number 2 receiver ahead of James Washington. I think he's definitely one to watch.
Yeah. But on the defense remains brilliant. Quite frankly. Yeah. And
Cam Hayward got a big contract extension, didn't he?
He did.
Yeah.
But yeah, not much change. It should hopefully, Tomlin's still there. The league is better with a competitive Steelers. So, let's hopefully they'll be back. Browns.
Browns have been really quiet this year. Last year it was all about, oh my God, we've got the best roster in the world. Look at all these players we signed. Aren't we brilliant? And obviously they fell far short of expectation. But you've hardly heard anything out of them.
I don't know. There's some pretty messy stories coming out about Beckham.
Well, there was recently, but we ain't going to get into that because, family podcast.
Well, last year, was it last year where they were Hard Knocks?
No, it was the year before.
Year before. But there's still, there was the Beckham trade last year, and the coach they've signed is basically the exact opposite of Freddie Kitchens. Yeah. He's a very quiet, humble guy. He doesn't want to see his team covered in shit. So, I guess for them, this is Baker's make or break year, because he's had an excuse last year that the line was awful, and this year, Jedrick Wills has come in, who shows a lot of talent. I think they didn't get him 10th in the draft, and a lot of people thought he was actually their best lineman.
Yeah,
they're still not great. They don't have a right guard or anything. But
the interior of the line's not great. But they signed Jack Conklin as well.
Yeah,
that's a massive uptick.
Yeah, which those 2 tackles now that's a massive improvement on where they were.
And they've still got the best left tackle in the league as well in Batonio.
Yeah, the problem with upgrading the O-line is it's just going to show you how bad Baker Mayfield is when he still doesn't improve.
We've said it before. We said it after the draft. He hasn't got any excuse this year, I don't think. I think he's got very offense-minded, an offense-friendly head coach who actually knows what he's doing, rather than Freddie Kitchens. He's got a decent offensive line. He's obviously got decent wide receivers, decent running backs, 2 good tight ends in David Njoku who can stay fit, and now Austin Hooper from the Falcons. And the defense is still just as stacked as well. So, again, on paper, this team should do very well, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, they've got Denzel Ward, who is just brilliant. Myles Garrett, sort of he's got his fifth year picked up. So, he's now playing for a massive contract, and he's been good, but the expectations are still sort of higher for Garrett as well. It doesn't help.
He's been pretty good, John. I know he spanked
he signed a 5-year
Mason
contract.
Rudolph in the head, but apart from that, most things he's done have been.
Oh, he's very good, but he's still. Smacking a bloke with his own helmet is not.
He needs to be available for 16 games.
Yeah,
right. But he did sign a 5-year contract for 125 million.
I did. Yeah, I didn't know. Obviously, I forgot that one. But
He was lost in amongst COVID.
Apologies, but it's Stefanski. Is he going to make all these offensive options and gel? Who knows? They need to get an offense that works for their star players. If you're going to pay Beckham however much he gets a year, you need to be able to get him in the game, which they did for 2 games last year.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got a new defensive coordinator who's worked previously with Salah, who they didn't sign as head coach from the 49ers. But yeah, so, and then lastly, Bengals. The ginger rifle is gone.
Red rifle.
No, he's not even red. He's just ginger. No, nothing against Dalton. Dalton was not the issue, but he's gone. Burrows is now in for a baptism of fire. They have AJ Green back after a year injured. They do have some talent. I do like Tyler Boyd. I think he's very good in the slot. But the team, it's not great. So they'll be looking for an improvement on last year. But
Mixon to have a good year, John, or not?
Yeah, Mixon's he's had 3 consistent years, so I can see more of the same from him as long as he stays fit.
Yeah, he was very injury plagued at the start of his career, wasn't
he? Yeah, but he's a successive 1,100 yard years. So why not another one? It's not like they're going to need him any less, and there's not much else with him either. It's not even like Giovanni Bernard anymore. So
he's still there.
Still there.
Oh, is he? God,
yeah, always.
Oh. He'll always be there. I actually think they're on course for a really decent season. I think if Joe Burrow is 3/4 as good as they say, this team is a winner. I think he's already going to be a better quarterback than Baker Mayfield. I really do. I think he will come in and immediately outplay Baker.
Does that matter?
Yes, I think so, because I think so much goes through the quarterbacks that it really does make a difference. And Carlos Dunlap on the defense, if he plays all the games, I think that Bengals defense is good enough. It's good enough to keep up with a decent quarterback. John, what's the finishing order in this division?
Ravens, Steelers, then far back, Browns and Bengals.
Everyone in reasonable agreement with that?
Yeah, I can't disagree with that.
I think the Browns should finish second. When you look at the roster,
they should, but
they just. You're right. The Steelers are a better team. The Browns have got better individuals.
Yeah, so
I think the Browns could challenge for a playoff place.
I'm going to say Browns will finish second this year.
That's funny because I'm going to say they finish last this year in that division. I just think if they don't get off to a good start, the big name players will just become disinterested again and they'll fall apart.
I don't know. I think when you look at it, Chubb and Hunt, Landry,
great personnel,
and Beckham,
Yeah, but they had a good point last year.
I know that, but at some point, with better coaching, at some point that has got to mean something, hasn't it? Man United, if you take it back to football teams, they didn't win the league with shit players, did they? They won it with Beckham and Giggs and Scholes,
And Diego Forlan.
But it's a very small part, isn't it? Coaching does come into it. That's why Belichick's,
it's a huge part.
It does.
Yeah. I'd like to be surprised, and Stefanski may come in, but they remind me of a struggling football team at the moment where we've had this one coach and he's not failed, he's not been successful. So what we do, we bring the exact opposite in, and so you go from like Neil Warnock to Alan Pardew, and you just go from shit to shit, and there's no culture.
Any team with a new coach is at a disadvantage because of COVID. So I'm not sure it works for them. So, but we'll see. We need to move on, not just because it's me next, but it's me next. So the AFC South, I'll give you some quick projections for what I think. I reckon this is the Titans division again. Trading them, Colts, Texans, and far back will be the Jags. And here's why. The Titans have basically done what people thought they couldn't and retained both Tannehill and Derrick Henry. So that's the comeback player and leader of QBR last year and the rushing yards leader. And then on top of that, the defence has added Vic Beasley, who apparently is somewhat overweight, but anyway, and Jadeveon Clowney. So the defensive front suddenly looks a lot stronger. AJ Brown was really good last year and will probably get better again. He crept just over the 1,000 yards, and I'll be surprised if he doesn't easily breeze past it this year. You're looking at like 1,200 or 1,300 yards.
I took him in Dynasty as well.
Yeah, Adam Humphrey should be fit this season. I know they had some criticism for signing him, but I think he's a really good number 2. So, and possibly most importantly, you're going to get a full season of Jonnu Smith without having Delaney Walker being thrust back in just because he was the nominal number 1 tight end when really he was a season over the hill. So I think on the offensive side especially, this team's massively improved. They've just signed Gostkowski as kicker, which, you know, the guy's won everything, seen everything. That's a great leader to sign, not just kicker. So I can't see that many weaknesses on the offense, other than the fact that we just mentioned a minute ago, Jack Conklin has left, and losing your star, possibly the best right tackle in football, is a big deal when you're Tannehill, because Tannehill does scramble, but he likes to survey the field first, so he's going to get a little less time, I think. They've also lost a couple of big defensive pieces. So Logan Ryan, who plays all over that secondary, has gone. And Jarrell Casey, who's led the team in sacks 3 times, has also gone. I think he got traded to Denver. And then add to the fact that Dean Pease, the defensive coordinator, has retired. And as I just mentioned, teams with new coaches and coordinators, I think they're at a disadvantage. So the defense may not be as good. And let's not forget, they really sort of fell apart defensively at the end of last season once they got into the playoffs. They weren't good enough to hold on to what the offense was putting up. The other thing that worries me is they're thin once you get through the starting 11s on either side of the ball. There's not many star names or even names with a lot of room for improvement beyond the starting 11s on either side. So they could be exposed by injury fairly easily. But I really like what Mike Vrabel's done since he's been there. And I think this team should be the best one there in that division this season.
I will pick up on one point. You're right, Jarrell Casey is a big loss, but they've got Jeffrey Simmons, who they picked up in the draft last year, who was injured at the start of the year and kind of made an appearance later on. He was coming into the draft, he was thought of as a top 5 lock of a player if he wasn't injured. So I'll expect big things from him. I'm also keen to see what Harold Landry does opposite Jadeveon Clowney. I think Landry's slightly different body type to Jadeveon Clowney. He's slightly faster. He got a lot of sacks last year. I'd expect to see him do well. And then a big step up for Rashaan Evans, the inside linebacker.
Yeah. So
you're right, they have lost some pieces, but I still think there's some good young players coming in that will take that over. You touched on it, I would be concerned about the amount of time Tannehill got in the pocket and how he's not going to have that as much time this year. And that could affect AJ Brown's production.
Oh, it could well do, but I just think in the division they're in, there's a lot of winnable games. That's what I think. Next up for me, the Colts, because their position of weakness last year was the quarterback. Brissett got off to a really good start and then just fell away when teams realised that if you can contain him, he isn't good enough passing. He's a great number 2 and a very below average number 1. That's what we discovered. Now, it all depends on whether you get good Phillip Rivers or last season's Phillip Rivers. He threw 20 interceptions last year to 23 touchdowns. But he also hasn't had an O-line this good in 10 years. So if you can keep him upright, the rest of the team is good enough. You get T.Y. Hilton back fit. You get Trey Burton to upgrade the tight end room, basically replacing Eric Ebron. Jack Doyle will be fit. They selected Jonathan Taylor, who's going to take a lot of the pressure off Marlon Mack. And they added Pittman as well at wide receiver. I think the offense, again, is loaded. And then on the key thing for me here is, anybody know how many kicks Vinatieri missed last season?
1.
Loads.
Lots.
9? 15, he missed 6 extra points and 9 field goals last season, which was comfortably the worst. So they've added Chase McLaughlin instead. that immediately upgrades his team. They lost so many narrow games because, again, another player was allowed to go past his best. And also, let's not forget, they got DeForest Buckner, who's been an outstanding player for the Niners, immediately makes this defense better. And really, the only weaknesses here, again, it's depth, the same as the Titans. It's a very similar issue. There's not a lot of backup players. And secondly, the Rivers drop-off could come as quickly as the Manning drop-off. It could be like 2 games into the season, he's no longer able to throw the ball. So if that happens, we already know Brissett isn't good enough. There isn't another plan. There's no young next quarterback.
Jacob Eason. They drafted him in the 2nd or 3rd round. I don't know if he's really good, but I completely agree with you. This whole season hinges on what Philip Rivers turns up.
Yeah. I think good Philip Rivers on the basis that the O-line will be good enough, and he probably doesn't have to do anything other than stand there and deliver, because this O-line has been fantastic. What did they? I think they won 7 games last year with Brissett. You add 2 games at least onto that for having Rivers there. That's good enough, probably for 2nd place in this division. I've got the Texans down for finishing 3rd, basically because all they've got is Deshaun Watson, who's signed a massive contract, which is great for him and great for the team. But Bill O'Brien has just robbed him of his best weapon and effectively replaced DeAndre Hopkins with a load of injury-prone players. David Johnson, great running back in both rushing and receiving, but not for the last 4 years.
3.
3 years, because he's always injured. Brandon Cooks, what do we know about Brandon Cooks?
He gets
knocked out.
Yeah, he gets knocked out a lot. Will Fuller, what's the most number of games he's played? This is his 5th year. He
plays well in 3 games a year.
When he plays, good.
When he plays, great. He's played 45 games in 4 years so far. That's not enough. So once those 2 get injured, you've got Randall Cobb, who is no longer good enough. And so I think when those players get injured, which they will, Duke Johnson and Randall Cobb don't keep this offense churning to keep up with the Titans and the Colts.
As well, Will Fuller is very good when you've got DeAndre Hopkins taking triple-double coverage.
Triple-double coverage. 6 players.
Well, but 2 or 3 players, were on Hopkins. Means you have space for Fuller. Fuller has to be the lead guy now, and he's, let's see what he's like.
They've got a lot. Yeah, you're right. They've got a lot of number 2 receivers like Will Fuller, Kenny Stills, Randall Cobb, Brandon Cooks. None of those players have ever been a number 1 wide receiver, really.
The other thing last year, do you remember 2 years ago, Watson was sacked 62 times, so they made that massive trade for Laramie Tunsil.
Yeah.
And last season, he was only sacked 44 times, which is a great improvement, but still the 6th worst in the league. This O-line, it's returning all the starters, and everyone's saying, oh, that's great, but they were still bad. So I don't see any reason to think that's going to massively improve. If he gets sacked 40 times, they don't shoot up the rankings, do they? So I think this team's on the slide. Bill O'Brien should always be on the hot seat. He's a good coach, but he's a terrible general manager.
Yep.
And I don't get it. I'm not quite sure why he's still there. If they finish 3rd in the division this season, I think it's done at general manager. They'll bring someone in to work with him, and they'll keep him as coach. That's what.
He absolutely wasted Deshaun Watson's rookie contract because, Watson's got the talent to has the talent to take a team into very late in the playoffs, if not a Super Bowl. But
imagine Deshaun Watson. Imagine Deshaun Watson on the Ravens.
Yeah, exactly.
That team is by far the best team. That would easily rival the Chiefs.
Yeah.
We ought to move on and cover possibly next season's number 1 pick. So, there are 1 or 2 teams competing, but I'm saying this is 2021 draft number 1 pick. What's the one strength for the Jags? Anyone?
There's no fans that have to suffer through it.
Yeah,
that is a great point I hadn't thought of. DJ Chark is the answer. He had a 1,000-yard season last season, brilliant, and he'll get the same again because they're going to be so far behind every week because they've got nothing on defense that Minshew's just going to throw him the ball. They're glued to Minshew now. They've let Foles go. It's definitely going to be him going forward. They're tanking for Trevor. Fournette's gone, which is good in some ways because I think he's a disruptive player. But do you know what you're going to get out of James Robinson?
Although Fournette did come out and say, look, I'm not just walking around the place angry all the time, but we're shit, and that doesn't make me very happy. And I was like, fair point.
Yeah, I can respect that point of view. But who's their best running back now?
Chris Thompson.
Chris Thompson. How many receiving yards and touchdowns does he have in his 6 seasons?
18.
9 touchdowns, 1,100 yards receiving.
He's pony, isn't he?
And he's got less than 900 rushing yards in 6 seasons as well.
He had a horrible leg break a couple of years ago.
He's been injured a lot. He's only played. No, he's never played 16-game season.
Yeah,
but he's their best running back.
He was at the football
team,
wasn't he?
He was at the football team.
The football team.
And their second best receiver might be Tyler Eifert, who only plays 8 games a season as well.
I don't know. I think you can see a lot from LaVisca Chenault Jr., the rookie wide receiver. They've got
good things, but
terrible.
Again, he's going to suffer from lack of a preseason. Their biggest weakness for me is Doug Moron. I don't get it. Why is he there?
Because you can't bring in a new coach to coach this bunch of losers. You don't want to bring in your guy and then have him have a 16-game losing season.
After the season, the GM and the coach get sacked, and they have a whole new front office, new coach, new quarterback, new team.
How many rushing touchdowns did the Jags allow last season? Anyone? Yes, the answer is lots. 23, which was second worst behind the Panthers' 31. They've now let Yannick Ngakoue leave, or he has left, and he's their best run stopper as well. So it's going to be rushing touchdowns galore.
Yeah, this is a terrible team. I remember last year when we did this, we looked at the Bengals roster, and I was like, I can't see anyone on this team that's any good, and that's where the Jags are this year. Like, they've got a few names, like you mentioned.
Josh Allen and Avon Lachesson, both good. They're not going to make up for a secondary that doesn't
want. They're rookies. You can't say Avon Lachesson is going to be as good as Calais Campbell, can you?
No.
Like, he's going to be a good player one day, but not this year.
No. Okay, so to recap, I've got Titans top, Colts a close second, Texans probably at 8-8, and the Jags at best 2-14. Anyone in massive disagreement?
No, I mean, you could see the Titans and the Colts swapping places. I think that is tight, but yeah, I mean, I'd be happy with that.
I disagree.
Go
on.
So I think the Colts will win the division.
Yeah.
By some way, maybe, actually. Because again, I agree.
Hang on. Sorry, Garrett, are you backing Philip Rivers?
I'm backing TY. Do you know what? I think compared to Jacoby Brissett and having DeForest Buckner on top of, is it Leonard or whatever it is?
Yeah, Leonard.
Yeah, I think their defense is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
And I don't think Rivers is going to need to do that much. Like, I think he can still be Philip Rivers and they'll be okay. Like, they're better. They're a better team than he had at the Chargers, and he went into the playoffs with them.
Completely agree.
Christ, you're a changed man. I love it.
Yeah.
I still think Rivers is shit, but like, you know, I don't think he's even that shit. I just think he's a bit of he's got no.
Or even if he's a choker,
he's got no bottle. So, you know, I'm not saying he's a terrible quarterback, but he's not a Hall of Fame quarterback. You know, just because he's got super sperm or something. So, you know, but I still think the Colts will win that division. And I don't think Tannehill. I think Tannehill was a one-off. Like, I don't think he's going to be as good this year. You know, because he's used all his prayers up. You know, like I've seen it on the acceptance speech for his comeback player of the year. He's used up all his prayers. He was praying and praying and praying. Like, God's given him nothing this year, and pure talent alone won't get him anywhere. So I'm going Colts, Texans, Titans, Jags.
Oh wow! No, but we're all agreed the Jags are going to be terrible.
Oh, Jags are awful, but I've got Colts, Titans, Texans, then the Jags.
Fair enough. Next up on our rundown is Gary with the AFC East. Go for gold.
Well, normally when you give me the AFC East, I just go, well, the Patriots are going to win this year, aren't they? So this year, even though I'm quite busy, you set me some work, which was a little disappointing. So we'll start with the Patriots. Obviously, a bit of a tumultuous off-season. Brady gone. They wanted him to stay. 8 players not turned up. So I think it's the highest number in the league.
Yeah.
You know, and some really big players as well. Donta Hightower, Patrick Chung, Marquise Lee. You know, some really big players. You know, And that's after you lost like Van Nooy, Gostkowski. It's been a bit of a clear out. I know the Patriots like to do that. I think the positives at the Patriots is one, Cam Newton, and I think Cam Newton is a player who has been just disregarded very quickly from the league. After being injured a bit. I think we are forgetting what he did in 2015 and the fact that he's only 31 years old. So, he basically single-handedly took that Panthers team to the Super Bowl, and he wasn't playing for Josh McDaniels at that point. So I really think we are underestimating who you got for less than $10 million a year.
Only time an MVP quarterback has been replaced by another MVP quarterback ever.
Yeah. So I think we're being a little naive, thinking that Belichick is just going to throw it away this year. I know that's what we all hope to see, but I'm not sure that is exactly what we are going to see. I think there's still holes, and I think that defense, having lost that many players, it's going to be difficult to see how that performs. Last year your defense kept you in so many games, but we'll wait and see. I think N'Keal Harry started to do well at the end of last year. I think he's going to become a big player for you. You haven't got a lot of strength at tight end. Edelman's not getting any younger. You've got a lot of flexibility with James White and some of your passing running backs. But I think the Patriots are going to have to find a way of making N'Keal Harry a massive part of the scheme, and I think they will. So I don't think the Patriots are as far off as people think they are. I think your defense is the big question. If Belichick has managed to work his magic with some, a lesser caliber players than what you've got missing, then you could be almost as strong as you were last year. You're obviously not. I don't think you're a Super Bowl winning team, but I don't think you're, as dross as people are making out.
Oh,
so that's the Patriots, nice and succinctly, because I haven't got all night. Next we have who's next? The Jets. Let's talk about the Jets. So I don't want to talk too much about the Jets because apart from their green shirt, I see very little positives at the Jets. So I quite like the green one. That's quite nice. It's a nice green, isn't it? It's like emerald green, So
yeah, lovely.
It's nice.
So I don't know which one I'd get, but I'm stalling a bit because.
Welcome to the Catwalk UK NFL podcast.
Well, it's because I'm going to go on to the negatives next, you see, Griff. So I've got to have some balance. I really don't see anything positive. CJ Mosley is opted out of the season. So he'd already received $10 million of his $16 million salary for the year by March. So so he's decided he'll forgo that other $6 million just to have the year off. But obviously that's a bit of a problem. Apparently Le'Veon Bell is just not looking great in training, doesn't want to be there. Frank Gore is looking far superior. The 37-year-old running back, Frank Gore.
Yeah.
Obviously, I did forget one other positive. Robbie Anderson is not there anymore. They've not really replaced him with anybody, but they still feel happy about it.
Yeah, you don't need to, do you?
So I just really don't know what the Jets are like. What they're doing, they're just stuck in the middle, aren't they? Just
treading water.
Yeah, they're
poor
just
team.
really poor.
Poor team, poor coach. They got Becton at tackle. That's an improvement for Sam Darnold. But you're right. Other than that, it's like their second wide receiver is Brashard Perriman.
Yeah,
it's just good.
And I think if they were in a really strong division, because I think if the Patriots were as strong as normal, then you would argue that this division is still reasonably strong, but it's weakened a bit from previous years. So I think the Jets will get a reasonable number of wins. They might get 5 or 6 wins, just because. I don't know. I think they will get 5 wins. The Jets.
5 maybe,
wins.
not more than 5.
But I don't think that'll be enough to. But I think if you put them in a tougher division, then potentially you're looking at top 2 or 3 pick. I think next year.
John's surprise yesterday when he realised that Chris Hogan's their number 3 receiver was brilliant. It's like, who even thought he was still playing?
I thought he retired.
Yeah.
There's not a lot to love on that team, is there really?
Nope.
it's a waste of Sam Darnold's early career. For me.
Yeah, and that is a concern. We would like to see Sam Darnold develop properly. We're into a new phase of quarterbacks, aren't we, at the moment in the league? Where the Breeze, the Brady, the Rivers of this world, the Roethlisbergers are not going to be around for another 5 years, are they? So we are looking at the next generation, and you're seeing some real difference in talent, but some of it's coaching, some of it's players around him. You look at Kyler Murray. He hasn't had Larry with him. What a difference that makes. Imagine the difference of Sam Darnold thrown to,
you.
Well, like thrown to nobody. Or
does anyone
Kyler
think
Murray
Adam Gase makes it through the season?
Fitzgerald. It's crazy.
He might make it through the season, but he won't make it into next season.
I think Adam Gase is a dead man walking.
I think he could be. And I think, especially because they've got Greg Williams as defensive coordinator, who's got experience now stepping up into mid-season.
That's what I mean. He's just going to take over with 6 games to go, I think.
Yeah. So, I'm not impressed with them. Not much positive to say. Bills. So, I like some of the stuff the Bills have done this year, actually. I think Diggs wants to be the man. I think that's a good signing. Is it John Brown there as well? So,
John Brown, yeah.
So you've got a couple of really good, really quick wide receivers. I think Rosen, has come on loads over the last 2 years. Both in his own ability to set the scheme and his own ability to read the game properly. I think they're trusting him and building the offense around what he's good at doing now as well, rather than trying to fit him in. And I think the Bills look really strong. So I think Diggs is a great move. He really wasn't happy at Minnesota, was he? He felt like he was the forgotten man behind Thielen, wanted people to throw him the ball. I think it's a real positive piece of work going on there. Jim?
Okay.
Well, Minnesota considers trading Diggs as a win-win because it was a win for Diggs because he wants to be the man. So I think what Buffalo have done is great, some great business. Quite frankly.
I mean they got to the playoffs with, like you say, John Brown and Cole Beasley as their number 1-2 receiver. And they're both, they're decent receivers. They're not a star. They needed a star. And they've gone out and got one. I think they got pretty good value for him. I know it's a first-round pick, but it's a first-round pick on a player who can produce. I think Josh Allen took a big step up last year, and I think he's ready to go again.
Diggs is moving from a team where Kirk Cousins completed nearly 70% of his passes to a team where Josh Allen hasn't completed 60% of his passes in either season. And I think that has a drastic effect.
Rather than Allen.
You did say Rosen. We let it slide. But Josh Allen has completed 58% of his passes. And
he throws it a lot more than Cousins. Minnesota's a run
a lot, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Minnesota's a run offense. That's why
I'm a Josh Allen supporter. I'm just saying I think it has an effect on a player like Diggs who needs volume, and he may not get it accurately enough to be as big a difference maker as he should be.
I think he just accepts volume though.
Yeah, what he'll get more of is deeper balls because Josh Allen's got a bigger arm.
I think what you got.
Who doesn't want deeper balls?
There you go.
I think what you've got to think is all running quarterbacks tend to throw the ball slightly more every single year, except for maybe Lamar. Mahomes threw the ball much more last year. Because they don't want to keep getting hit all the time. They can only take so much, and I think you'll see the same with Allen. I think it'll be much more. I think there's still a lot of scrambling in his game rather than kind of planned runs, and I think you'll see it move slightly more to more schemed runs, not so much scrambling. I think that will still be a skill set for him, but I don't think you'll see it as much. And I think over the next year or two, you'll see that improve.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So that leaves us with the Dolphins. Now, I've got a lot of positive things to say about the Dolphins, actually. So although I don't think they're going to do very much this year, I think that's okay. Obviously, they went into quite big rebuild mode last year, didn't they? Shipped a load of people out mid-season. They didn't leave themselves with a huge amount, apart from Devontae Parker, to catch the odd ball. But they did trade well, expensively, but they did bring in some quality, didn't they? So Van Nooy's gone to the Dolphins, hasn't he?
Yeah.
And who else was it? Someone else we mentioned earlier in the podcast. Logan Ryan?
I don't recall if he's on the Dolphins or not. I'll tell you.
Well, Byron Jones, the cornerback.
Byron Jones.
Jones. That's who I was after, Jim.
Yeah.
Well done. Prepped here, you see. So they did, like I said, they paid a lot of money for some of these players. Big contracts, gave up quite a lot. But then they still drafted Tua, number 5. They drafted Austin Jackson, defensive tackle, at 18. They picked a cornerback up.
Pronounce his name.
Go on, say it.
Bin Ognei.
Good effort.
Robert Hunt, was one of the best guards in the draft. So they drafted really well, the Dolphins. And I think they've built a very good young team, with some key pieces in it. And I think within a couple of years, they will really start to come through. So I think the Jets are the worst team in this division.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it would definitely be the Patriots to prove everybody wrong, followed by the Bills, followed by the Dolphins, followed by the Jets.
I've got
Bills well ahead.
Yeah.
I've only got one game ahead of the Patriots. I think they might take games off each other in this division because I think the Dolphins will probably win, or possibly against both of those teams, just because it's a divisional game.
Cam Newton took a worse Panthers team.
Yeah, I agree with Gary on this. I think he's been undervalued, and the fact that he's fit enough to start the season, it's just the fact he hasn't got a lot of weapons. But if he racks up 600 rushing yards this season, we probably win the division.
Do you think Cam Newton might have something to prove to all the people that thought he was done?
And he also, don't forget, he needs a contract for next season.
Yeah, I think you've got.
He probably wants to stay at the Patriots, in which case he needs to win.
Behind him, you've got absolutely nothing. So if he does get injured, then I'm going to reassess this prediction.
Currently, they're saying if he gets injured, Brian Hoyer is the next man up. It's not Stidham.
So just so this is on record, if Brian Hoyer ends up in game, like playing from game 2 onwards, then you're coming third in that division because he's terrible.
I agree. I think the Jets are a distant last place. My only concern with the Dolphins is they're still playing Eric Flowers at left guard.
And when do you reckon Tua comes in? I reckon Tua comes in after 8 games.
Yeah, it won't be till game 8, 9, 10, something like that. Once they're mathematically...
Some people are saying he might play 10 games this year.
No, I don't think we will see him. I can easily, what with everything that's gone on with his injury in the past and everything that's gone on with COVID this year, he's not had a proper preseason. I could see them riding with Ryan Fitzpatrick for the whole year.
Yeah,
they're saying that they cut Rosen because of how fit and how confident they are that Tua can back up.
I agree.
They cut Rosen because Rosen's shit.
I think what Gary's point is, I think Tua is fitter than we think, but what they will probably do is go with Fitzpatrick until they're eliminated, but they'll put Tua in the fourth quarters when they're out of games.
And if you are going to play fantasy, I would say definitely if you get to those later rounds and nobody else has thought to pick up Tua, then someone should.
Yeah. Right, that's the AFC East done.
Comprehensive, I
So that just leaves us with the West and Jim.
All right, let's start with our Super Bowl champions, the Kansas City Chiefs. I think kind of one of the key things with Kansas is they've got a really settled team. So 20 of the 22 starters from the Super Bowl are actually returning, which is pretty rare because you normally see Super Bowl teams kind of picked apart. Players go for, they move away from the Super Bowl winning teams. They'll get higher salaries. They kind of use that bonus to kind of line their pockets. But what we've seen is almost kind of the opposite. Yes, we've seen kind of big contracts for Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, but the likes of kind of Sammy Watkins, who took basically a pay cut to stay at Kansas, it kind of speaks to the kind of the team ethos that's been built there, and I think they're confident that they can win again. And really, I think kind of most of us would probably agree that they're probably the favourites in the AFC East to kind of return to the Super Bowl. Like I said, I think the offense is probably going to get better. I really like the addition of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. There's a reason, like he's getting a lot of hype. They don't have Damian Williams, who is on injured reserve because of COVID. He's kind of opted out. But I think Edwards-Helaire could be kind of could be an upgrade on him, and I think we will see kind of a lot of play from him. And for those who managed to pick him up in fantasy, well done, because he was certainly a player I wanted to target. So I kind of think no one's going to doubt the Chiefs unless kind of Patrick Mahomes gets injured. I think that they're probably the team destined to go back to the Super Bowl, and I would not be surprised to see them win back-to-back Super Bowl. That's it, really. Anyone else got anything else from the team?
I've got nothing for that. I can't disagree with a word.
They just look so good.
Yeah.
So good. They look better than last year.
Yeah.
Which is horrible.
I think their running game could be better. I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be superb in that scheme.
You think about like the weapons they've got in terms of like Edwards-Helaire, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Sammy Watkins, even Nicole Hardman now, who's like it's his second year. He
tight end? Who's tight end?
Travis Kelce.
What was talking about?
Yeah. You got pretty much the same offensive line, and you got the highest paid player in the NFL at quarterback, and rightly so. He was brilliant last year, and he's definitely the best quarterback in the league, best quarterback we've seen for some time, I think. So yeah, that's the Chiefs. Denver Broncos. I'm really looking forward to seeing Denver play this year. I'm quite excited by their offense, but I'm also quite excited by their defense. I think people are a little bit underhyped on Denver just because Kansas obviously is so strong. I still think the Chiefs will win the AFC West, but I think the Broncos could be a bit of a surprise package. I think Drew Lock is probably not a spectacular quarterback. I think we'll see him take a step up, but I think he's good enough to get the ball to what is an armory of weapons around him. So they brought in Melvin Gordon, who's a good running back. They've still got Philip Lindsay, and they've still got Griff's favourite Royce Freeman there. So there's depth at running back. Wide receivers, they've got Cortland Sutton, who I think is a number one receiver without a doubt.
I've seen him dropping in a load of fantasy leagues. I don't get it.
The only reason I can see why is because of the amount of kind of players they do now have on offense. Yeah. So if you are playing in a PPR league, which most people are now, you might kind of think, well, they've got they drafted Jerry Jeudy, who's like one of the best.
That's Jeudy.
Yeah. One of the best wide receivers. They also drafted KJ Hamler, who was highly thought of. They've got Noah Fant at tight end, who had his moments last year. I think kind of tight ends are always better in the second year than they are the first. And obviously, Philip Lindsay and Melvin Gordon are going to take receptions as well. So that's the only reason I can think for Cortland Sutton dropping in fantasy draft. But he's still a heck of a player. And then the defense is, Vic Fangio, the coach there. He's a defensive-minded head coach. I think one of the reasons the Bears, we mentioned it earlier, the Bears kind of defense dropped off is because of the lack of Fangio. They get Bradley Chubb back, so him and Von Miller on the edge. We mentioned that they brought in Jarrell Casey from the Titans, so that's good power through the middle. They lost Chris Harris Jr., who is a brilliant cornerback, but they traded for Jags player again, AJ Boye, a former Jags player. I think he went to the Texans as well. And it's a well-stocked team. Yeah, there's probably some names in here you wouldn't really recognise. They can all do a job on their day. Players like Deshaun Hamilton, the wide receiver. He's a decent fourth or fifth wide receiver. I think if you put him on the Jets, he'd be probably number one. I'm looking forward to seeing what the Broncos can do this year. I'm quietly confident they'll upset a few people.
Is it worth them having Melvin Gordon as their number one running back, or should they leave Philip Lindsay to do it?
No, Melvin Gordon.
Melvin Gordon
is a star.
And they got him, didn't they? Got $7 million or something?
Yeah,
basically he got usurped, didn't he, by Austin Eckler, and that's fine. Yeah. But he got usurped because he didn't want to play without a contract that he was happy with. So he should still be a great player. It's not the same thing as the Todd Gurley situation.
No.
I think they had a great player in Philip Lindsay, and I don't think the two of them can share the spotlight.
I think they're very different types of players. Like I've kind of mentioned it before. Philip Lindsay has been described as a jitterbug of a player. He's got great sidestep, great acceleration. Melvin Gordon's just going to plough through the middle. They're two different types of running backs, so you can alternate between them based on what defense you're playing against.
He wasn't happy, was he, about the money that Melvin Gordon got paid? Was he? If I remember rightly, it kicked off.
I don't recall.
I don't know, but at the end of the day, I think he will get a contract at some, if not at the Broncos and somewhere else, because I think he's been, for an undrafted free agent, he was a revelation in the last 2 years.
I think the key for Drew Lock is that running back stable takes some of the pressure off him, so he gets time to develop, and he will be a good player. I think he better be, because their backup is Jeff Driscoll. So I'm just saying.
All right, so moving on to the Chargers. Obviously, end of an era of Phillip Rivers going to the Colts. I'm not sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing. We'll find out. But they brought in Tyrod Taylor. He came in last year. He's now been named as a starter at quarterback for them. Not sure how long that will last. I think it's another case of him getting usurped by a rookie quarterback. I really like Justin Herbert in college. I think he had a poor season last season, but I think if he would have come out the year before, he would have been, probably a top 10 or top 5 pick. He's got a heck of an arm. He's got lovely hair as well. If you've seen him on Hard Knocks, he's well endowed in the hair department, so something to look out for. They signed Jerry Fogle.
That was John, but I wouldn't want him a quarterback.
Well, that's because of the arms. They've done some good business in the sense that they're keeping Joey Bosa. They signed him to the biggest contract that defensive players got, rightly so. He's one of the best pass rushers in the league. They signed Keenan Allen to an extension, again, rightly so. He's one of the best pass catchers in the league. And they also renegotiated Melvin Ingram's contract after he got upset that Jerry was getting paid more. So, good bit of business. They have got problems with injuries, though. Derwin James, who was kind of their star safety over the not last year, because he was out most of the year injured. Yeah. He's going to be out injured for all this year again, which is a massive loss for them. I don't think you can really underestimate how big a loss that is. I think that kind of changes the defensive scheme quite a lot. As I mentioned, they brought in Chris Harris Jr. at cornerback. That's a great pickup. And I think a lot of it kind of depends on how fit kind of Hunter Henry stays. I think he's a quality tight end, but I'll be honest with you, I didn't go near him this year in fantasy because the guy just can't stay fit. Whether it's Tyrod or Justin Herbert at quarterback, I think if he's playing, they'll look to find him. But if he's not there, there's not a lot of depth at tight end behind him. And I also think there's quite a lot of pressure now on Austin Eckler. He's got another contract extension. He was a great player in Melvin Gordon's absence, but can he step up and actually be that number one without Melvin Gordon kind of breathing down his neck? We'll find out. So that's the Chargers.
Don't forget they've got Justin Jackson behind Austin Eckler, who averaged nearly 7 yards an attempt from last season.
How many attempts did he have?
20. Something like that. 25. But
29 attempts.
I'm just saying, he's there, and I think he's an undervalued number 2. I think he's a good player. As for the rest of that offense, one piece goes missing. Keenan Allen, Hunter Henry, like you say, it's over.
Yeah.
Tyrod will run, and Justin Herbert is a year too early for me.
Yeah, definitely.
So one piece goes down, they're done.
I don't think they're going to have a great season. I think it'll just be, average.
Yeah. I think you're right.
I quite like the coaching.
I've been really impressed with Anthony Lynn on Hard Knocks, actually.
Yeah.
I think he's a coach that players respond well to. And I'd like to see him do well, but I completely agree. I don't think it's this year that they're going to be. I don't see them going into playoffs this year. Let's put it like that.
Although they are the team most used to play with no fans.
Well, yeah,
yeah.
Another good point. They're going into into a new home this year, aren't they? So they'll be sharing the SoFi Stadium with the Rams, which, seeing as they couldn't fill a 27,000 seater stadium, is probably a good thing that they're not going to have to fill the stadium this year. But the stadium looks immense.
Mm.
Raiders, the Las Vegas Raiders. It's going to take a bit of getting used to. So another team going into a new home, but obviously moving city as well, which brings its own complications to to a franchise, and probably at the worst point in time possible to move City, what with everything going on. Again, I kind of mentioned injuries for the Chargers, but Tyrell Williams, the wide receiver, has also got an injured reserve for the Raiders this year, which basically means Henry Ruggs, the wide receiver they drafted in the first round, has to step up and basically be the number one receiver right from the off. Because
their receiving depth chart is Henry Ruggs. Now he could be great. Henry Ruggs could be great.
Yeah, he could be.
Him, Hunter Renfrow and Sosa from the Packers, Zay Jones and Nelson Aguilar.
Yeah,
it's bad.
Yeah, it's really bad. It's one reason that I wanted to take Henry Ruggs in fantasy, because he's obviously going to get a lot of passes because there's literally no one else to pass to. They got Jason Witten at tight end, and who's the other? They got another good.
They got Darren.
I think
Waller.
Going on holiday, didn't he? Witten.
Yeah. They've got Darren Waller. He'll be their key.
Yeah, he is a good tight end, and they got Josh Jacobs, running back as well, who's a good running back, but. I don't know. I can't see this Raiders team doing very well. I don't think their defense is very good. I don't think they've addressed some.
This time last year, we sat here and we said, right, with another draft behind them, this team could be really good. They've taken 0 steps forward from last year.
I completely agree. I mean, they've got the offensive line is sneakily one of the best offensive lines in the league, but they've just got nothing else. Looking through the roster at the defense, it's like
it's poor. It's not good enough to compete in this division, and this division isn't one of the stronger ones.
Yeah, I think
you've got the Chiefs, but there's nothing else.
We've got the Chiefs. I think the Broncos will be good. So you've got, and even the Chargers, I think, are a better team on paper than the Raiders. So I mean, that's the order I've got this division finishing is Chiefs, Broncos, Chargers, Raiders.
Yeah. I think as well, if Derek Carr has any problems, remember the year that they got to the playoffs and he couldn't play and they started Connor Cook for his only ever dreadful. So Marcus Mariota, as we said, has gone on IR. So the backup is Nate Peterman with Deshaun Kaiser on the practice squad. Now, Derek Carr, exactly. Derek Carr gets a lot of crap. If he gets injured in any way, it's sunk, it's over. This team won't win another game.
How many years left from John Gruden's contract? 7 now?
7.
Jesus. You've got to, by year 3, you've got to be making steps forward, and they just haven't. Disappointing.
I think they'll be above the Chargers this year.
No, I can't see it.
I think the Raiders will be bottom.
Yeah.
I've got Chiefs, Chargers, Broncos, Raiders.
I think there's too much change at the Chargers.
Raiders won't be bottom.
Raiders will be bottom. They've bought the defense isn't great, but they've still bought in some decent players, Littleton, and they'll be fine. They just won't be great at the playoffs.
Whether you believe in Gruden, and I don't believe in Gruden.
They haven't got a pass rusher. Like there's no elite pass rusher or even vaguely good pass rusher on this team. Like the last 3 years, they've struggled to get to the quarterback and they've struggled for interceptions.
The Broncos and Chargers defenses are both way better than the Raiders.
Yeah, you look at the pass rushers and there's no big name there. You look at the cornerback and there's no big name there. You look at the linebackers and there's no big name there. I mean, unless they group together in an amazing team fashion, I can see people putting a lot of points on the Raiders because there's nothing there.
Right. That's the end of our AFC Preview podcast. At the end of the next podcast, we will pick Super Bowl winners, playoff winners, things like this. But for now, part 1 out of the way. Thank you very much.